Hello, BookTube. It's a bleak and barren Monday here at Hyde Cottage. Bleak and barren is a phrase that I use to describe my Sundays for years on this channel because on Sundays I get no free books in the mail. But Sundays are now the day of our read-alongs, and that makes them no longer bleak and barren. But today, Monday, is a federal holiday. There is no mail of any kind. No free books in the mail. And I think that qualifies as bleak and barren. And what I used to do for years on bleak and barren Sundays here was to console myself with a tag. I want to do one today. I have one that I was tagged in a while ago and just didn't get to. It's the Bookish boxes and buzzwords tag. And I was tagged by Elizabeth at LizzyFayeLovesBooks. And the questions are all about the non-critical stuff, the stuff that really shouldn't sway us as readers, but that does. We all have our little breviary, a little vocabulary of things that represent our sweet spots in reading, and this is all about that. So number one is your go-to genre or favorite type of book, and for me, that's biography. There's nothing more disappointing than a shallow biography, a quick job done for money, but in my opinion, there's nothing more satisfying than a richly good biography, something where the author doesn't have to be long, but where the author has dug into the sources and really thought about them. And fortunately, every season produces a dozen of those at least, so I always have something to whet that appetite. Question number two is retellings that you're drawn to. I'm going to buck with BookTube, with the BookTube consensus here, so I'm pretty sure the BookTube consensus would be, it's mystifying to me, but I'm pretty sure the BookTube consensus would be fairy tales. BookTube seems to have an unholy fascination with fairy tales, but for me, it's Homer. It's retellings of the Iliad, the Odyssey, spin-off stories from there. I've always been fascinated by them, even from the earliest examples which we have, which are, millennia old, to the point where I've done them myself. I've written 3 Homer pastiches, and I'm inexorably drawn to every new one that comes out, even though they most often disappoint. I mean, not even just disappoint in terms of comparing it to Homer, because everything would disappoint then, but also disappoint just in terms of inventiveness, in terms of either catching Homer's spirit or conveying a spirit of the author's own. There's a very prominent Homer pastiche novel in this current season of contemporary fiction that is a disappointment from start to finish, and is by a seasoned author. So, but I'm drawn to them anyway. I can't help it. And then question number 3 is lifestyles or careers of book characters. And I don't really have one when it comes to fiction. I'm assuming this question is about fiction, but I'm assuming I don't really have a favorite lifestyle or career when it comes to fiction. But when it comes to nonfiction, at least until 2018, I preferred as a not so much a lifestyle or career, but as a theme to either, that the subject of a biography or a history or whatnot be someone who took enough chances to have an impact on the world around them. A major impact. The more major, the better. It's in 2018. 2018, I've been reading a raft of biographies of people who are extremely unconventional on those grounds, and I've been loving them. So I guess impact is an elastic term. And question number 4, places or settings that you're drawn to. I think, like everybody, my answer to this is places that I know well. Places that I guess no. I guess a lot of people would answer this by using places that they're drawn to because they've never been there. But for me, it's places that I know well. Boston, Ireland, especially northwestern Ireland, India, especially central India, Texas, especially Austin, and of course Venice. Places where I have spent a lot of time, places that I know really well. I'm drawn to those. I don't use blinkers, and I try not to play favorites, especially since going to a book for its location, you're, again, like with Homer pastiches, you're as likely to be disappointed as pleased with the author's descriptions. So, but just off the top of my head, just reflexively, it's places where I have been, where I've spent a lot of time, a lot of wonderful time. And question number 5 is relationships that you enjoy reading about. And again, I try not to be specific. I try to be open-minded to everything. But one of the things that is really hard to do in fiction, in my opinion, is male friendship. Where there's no hint of the erotic, where there's no hint of a power disparity, where it's just two equals coming together and forming a friendship. That's it's been my experience that's a very hard thing to draw believably in fiction of any kind. And I know of only a handful of successful examples. I think the small number of examples that I know of is the corroboration that I use for the fact that this must be difficult to do. But one way or another, I'm always pleased when I encounter that. It's just, I don't even look for it anymore because it's so rare, I hardly ever expect to see it. Then question number 6 is buzzwords in the title of a book. I don't have any buzzwords in the title of the book that draw me to it, although I will admit, I mean, that I have buzzwords that repel me from books. Book titles are so abominably bad so much of the time that in any given year, fads will be followed. We went through a fad a couple of years ago that still hasn't petered out, of the girl in the title, the girl who, the girl that, the girl wherever, endlessly for hundreds of books, and that still hasn't petered out. But there are all sorts of others, including people, authors or agents or publishers, who decide inexplicably to give books unbelievably cliched titles, titles that come from an idiom, like No Way Out, titles that Moment of Doom, or the most popular one of all, The Reckoning, where what is the point of titling your book something like that, or The Return, or The Promise, something like that? Why give your book that title, which says nothing at all about it or you? But I'll still read those books. But that causes a wince when I see a boring, unimaginative title. I wince a little. And then let's see here. Question number 7: things on a book cover that draw you in. And for me, I try to be, as you know, BookTube, I try to be extremely ecumenical in my reading. I don't like covers to manipulate me at all. I have a few examples here, incredibly wide variety of things that will draw me in on a cover. Like, for instance, there's this one. See the elaborate, ornate carving of the chair? Isn't that lovely? Or what about this one? Look at the vibrant colors of the background there. Well, it's very eye-catching, don't you think? Or what about this one? I don't know if you can make it out, but that candlestick in the background is extremely well done, don't you think? Oh, it would draw anybody's eye. Or what about this? Look at the way the artist conveys the rubber texture of the gloves. So really, as you can see, it could be anything. Then question number 8 is nonfiction buzzwords. Well, about time. Thought we'd never get to nonfiction. BookTube never even remembers that nonfiction exists, unfortunately. And for nonfiction buzzwords, those of you who know me in real life, and those of you maybe who have been watching this channel for the long Bataan death march of videos, might be aware that I do have, if by buzzwords we mean certain buzz categories of books, I do have some. There are dead Kennedys, there are dead kings, there are dead emperors. But again, 2018 has really reminded me over and over again that those are not a limited thing at all. That I can read a great book after great book after great book that has nothing to do with my standard Steve categories. So it's best to get that reminder periodically, because otherwise those reminders become habits. They become carved in stone, and you can't escape them. And that kind of narrow, blinkered reading is almost as bad as no reading at all. So I'm glad, actually, that 2018 is being so unconventional. It's a little disconcerting, I admit. There's a small part of me that is hoping that for instance, biographies in 2019 go back to being about dead presidents. That's a little part of me, but I try to control that part, because otherwise, if you're not an adventurous reader, then what are you? What's the point of reading if you're not an adventurous reader? And then question number 9 is medical or physical conditions of characters. I've been racking my brains about this one, but I can't think of an example of something where I would care. one way or another, especially if the question, as I suspect, is very narrowly looking at some very narrow bandwidth of fiction. I can't imagine what it would be. So we'll just move on to question number 10. A time of year or a history that you're drawn to. And for me, in nonfiction, that's quite a bit. And the reason why it's quite a bit is because I have been reading nonfiction for a long time. And when you do that, you start, if you're doing it right, if you're doing it in the most congenial way, you start with a little kernel that you really find interesting already. No matter what it is, if you're in your early 20s and you think I'm not interested in nonfiction whatsoever, that isn't true. If you think about, imagine opening up, your iPad or whatever and looking at Netflix and seeing a row of documentaries. I guarantee you that if you looked at a row, if you claim stoutly that nonfiction doesn't interest you, and you looked at a row of documentaries, I guarantee you would pick one before you would pick the others. You wouldn't look at that row of documentaries, let's say 10 of them, and say, I have no interest in any of these. No, that wouldn't happen. Even if let's say they were all historical. You still wouldn't say, I have no interest in, my interest is equally negative in all of these. No, I guarantee you one or two would jump out. Something already interests you about nonfiction. And with beginners in nonfiction, I always say, that's the place to start. Is it Florence Nightingale? Is it the history of whaling? Is it some unknown engineer decades and decades ago who came up with some little thing that you find interesting? Is it, God forbid, big game hunting? Well, no matter what it is, there's going to be something or someone that interests you more than just on a level playing field. And my advice is always latch onto that. Grab that one thing and read about it. Learn about it. Your interest will prevent it from feeling like drudgery, and when you're done, you'll know a lot more, and it won't be just about that one thing. And that's the process that I followed in my own reading of nonfiction. So the wide number of subjects that interest me are all because I started out with those little nubs. So, World War I, for instance, most especially World War II, and World War II, an endless stream of writing about the greatest cataclysm ever in the history of mankind, and it's within living memory. There are people still alive who remember it, who took part in it. My own father took part in it. The greatest war of all time, and not just a war, but the greatest upheavals, the greatest moments of heroism and villainy, greater than anything you could find in a multi-volume epic fantasy. And it was all real, and it all really happened, and people endlessly write about it, and it evokes eloquence in people. So that's probably above all. But there's also the Italian Renaissance, a whole swath of the world suddenly realizing that they exist in a continuum of time, suddenly experiencing that the love of reading, the rush of discovery, that watching that unfold in courts and monasteries and whatnot, and also medieval England, a rather broad heading, I know, but still, medieval England is fascinating. The compromises and the way that it never is quite what the easy term, the Dark Ages. It never is quite dark. You just have to hunt harder for the light. But that it's fascinating to me, the voices that come out of there, and tell us about it. But also ancient Rome for 1,000 years, from the earliest Republican era all the way to the sundering of East and West. That is just fascinating. It's just a fascinating story. And the more you learn about any of these things, they might seem to a newcomer to be big and intimidating, but the more you learn about them, the less intimidating they are, the more fascinating they are, the firmer the ground is under your feet. So it'd be those, but probably a bunch of others as well, but those would be the big ones. And then, what are you doing? I'm not the only one who's suffering from no mail. my little portable shredder has no packages to tear apart, and she just last week, the light bulb went off in her head. Just last week, she realized that this is a regular thing and that she really likes it. and she's very, very smart. So she doesn't just learn that she likes something, she also precisely remembers it and predicts it ahead of time. And she knows that it's not happening today, and that it's got her sort of ruminating around looking for things to destroy. But anyway, Lizzy Faye added some bonuses. I thought we'd go through those and then we'll wrap this up. Bonus number 1 is any other boxes or buzzwords. And there are quite a few for me, but I thought of 2. I am sure that this question is referring to fiction. We really have to talk, BookTube. we've done wonders in the last 2 years with BookTube's manic, necrophilic obsession with YA, all things YA, and not just with reading it, but with treating it like it was real. So the dreamy blonde-haired boy who'd make a great husband, and the bad boy with long black hair who runs the paramilitary group, you talk about them in your videos like they were real people. And I don't know, I kind of find him, he's kind of attractive but a little safe. But then there's that other one, oh, he's so rude, but he's really hot. Adults, fully grown voting adults talking that way. We've done great strides in the last 2 years in getting that under control on BookTube. As more and more people come on to BookTube and realize, well, okay, that's a lot of what I see, but I don't read that at all. And if I did read it, I wouldn't read it that way. And we've also made great strides in how we BookTube, right? I'm sure that your own subscription feed reflects this. We now visit with each other. And those visits can span the spectrum. You can go at one end of the spectrum. You can have Olive at a Book Olive, who has beautiful lighting and who has a light, very dexterous editing hand, and who therefore presents you with a finished product, and it's a delight to watch. And at the other end of the spectrum, I suppose, it would be yours truly, who doesn't edit and whose lighting is what God provides, and all that sort of thing. But one way or another, we visit with each other now. There's a different ethos in place than there was at the beginning of BookTube, I think. And that's just growing as time goes on, and more people with more and more kinds of readers join and gain an audience and feel welcomed. But BookTube, there's one thing that remains, and that is that nonfiction is still outside of the tent looking in. Now, Olive, to mention Olive, is going to do her part. She does her part every November with Nonfiction November, and I, of course, will be joining right in. But I am sure that this bonus prompt here refers to fiction. And if it refers to fiction, I was thinking about it, and there are a couple of buzzwords that do attract me when it comes to fiction. I don't, heed them. I read everything. It's kind of my job. I view it certainly as my professional responsibility to read as much that is new as I possibly can. And if you view that as your duty, then you even if something repels you, I will dig in. Well, you've seen me dig in, and sometimes it happens on this channel all the time. Sometimes I will go into something just feeling awful about it, and it will please me. It will surprise me or challenge me. So, and in the realm of fiction, even though I don't let them restrict what I read, there are 2 buzzwords that do intrigue me. One you all already know, which is debut fiction, debut works of fiction, where the author might have published a short story here or there, but this is their first book. This is their introduction to the literary world. I love that. I absolutely love the feeling of that. The clean canvas feeling of that. What will this person do with their career? Will they have one? Or is this the only book they feel like writing? And if they have one, how much of this first book will follow through into other books? I think that's just fascinating. But another one at the other end of the spectrum is when a work of fiction, usually a very long book, is characterized as the culmination of a lifetime of research or the culmination of a lifetime of reading, or a big event, in other words, where it's not Barbara Pym just sending off a manuscript to her editor and saying, well then, I've got to do a turn in the garden, and I'm meeting so-and-so for tea, and then tonight I will start another book. It's not, they can still be really good, but there's no sense of, I have labored to bring this forth. I have suffered to make this for you. And when there is a sense of that, that also intrigues me. It's extra heartbreaking when something gives that sense, or when the author comes right out and says it and the book is still bad, but that also intrigues me. Those two, debuts and culminations of life work, would definitely be further buzzwords. And the last one, the second bonus, is boxes or buzzwords that turn you away. And there were two that came to mind. One is memoirs of people who are extremely young. And that has always been a turn-off of a buzzword, because the arrogance of it would be off-putting and disturbing anyway, even not in a literary setting, even just in anyone. If you met a 27-year-old at a party or a book launch or whatever, and they started propounding about their lessons of life, even if they weren't a writer, you would think, well, geez, maybe you ought to experience something first before you start propounding. And so the idea has always bothered me about memoirs. Every once in a great while, one will come along that is either partly justified, like, for instance, Kenneth Branagh's. When he was still a very young man, he wrote a memoir, and it was justified because he'd already done some incredible work. Or when the memoir is medical, when it's a medical memoir, something that they're very young, yes, but they've suffered through some illness, or the illness of someone they know and love. That can be interesting. But more and more, oh God, if that was a problem of mine before the internet age, imagine what it's like now. It's still a problem of mine, but there are 100,000 more examples. The worst crop of which, by far, was that endless stream of memoirs and life lesson guides by 22-year-old YouTube stars who got 1 million followers by eating spoons of raw cinnamon, and suddenly feel like, well, now it's time for me to give you my life lessons. What things I've learned about being on Earth all these 22 years. There wasn't one of those books that wasn't just purely, revoltingly ridiculous. And they just kept coming, week after week after week after week after week. And that still occasionally happens. The fad right now, for the last couple of years, has been fake medical memoirs, where it's not that you had bone cancer when you were 18, and you suffered and you learned the limits of humility, and you learned the greatness of your doctors and the love of your parents, and you lost part of your leg, but you've learned to live with it. No, instead it's that at age 22, when you graduated from college and realized that the little womb that you had been in had broken open into the world, and the world didn't care about you at all, and you had to make a living, quite a few people at that juncture in their life decided to become sick. And one of those memoirs is even called Sick, and has the close-up of the author's face on the cover with an oxygen tube in her nose. And the important thing to remember about all of those memoirs, all of these sickness memoirs, all of them, the important thing to remember about all of them is that they're all lies. Every single one of them is based on a lie. These people, there is absolutely nothing physically wrong with any of their authors, and there never has been. There's one young author who's made a career out of writing about her illness, and it is not real. There is nothing physically wrong with her, and she's not alone. There are plenty of others. So stuff like that, memoir, and they're always young people, and it's just, I believe the motivation is the same. It's well, you can't expect me to go to a party. You can't expect me to hustle. You can't expect me to work my hiney off in order to make a living if I'm sick. and of course, there's a proliferation of doctors who will diagnose you with anything that you want, as long as you're good for the money, as long as your parents are good for their monthly payment. And the drug industry is right there with drugs for everything, including, especially, non-existent ailments. They create the ailment. They suborn the testimony of easily bought doctors or specialists in order to say, yeah, this is real, in exchange for all expense paid trip to a conference in the U.S. Virgin Islands. And then all of a sudden, it's in the DSMR, and if it's there, then there ought to be a medicine for it. And coincidentally enough, we who paid for the doctor's testimony also make the medicine. So it's clear you need that. That sort of stuff. Not only that drives me crazy, not only because it's entirely fraudulent, it's just entirely snake oil, but also because it badly obscures people who are sick. It badly hampers the reaction of somebody who maybe realizes that one of these faux illness memoir writers is perfectly healthy, or if they're, God forbid, photographed doing something. The reaction of some people when they realize that is to say, well, it's all fake then. And that's not true. No, that's not true at all. A memoir of a 25-year-old who has struggled seriously on the brink of complete darkness for 10 years with, for instance, severe manic depression, could be not only an extremely illuminating memoir to read, but a lifeline for the author to write. And all of that is endangered. If that author is surrounded on both sides by 10 people who are claiming an illness they don't have, one way or another, memoirs of young people, for whatever the reason, tend to annoy me still. There's one other buzzword that will sometimes incline me to turn me away from a book. I still read them, but I will read them with a dyspeptic eye. I want to wrap up with this, and that is useful books. It's a booming category, so it's not like it's going anywhere, and it's not new. But and also I'm sure helps a lot of people, but they bug me. Books where their only purpose is to convey information to you that you will extract from the book and then use. Whether it's business or flipping houses or whatever it is, those books, I do sometimes read them, but maybe the thing that bothers me is that they are outside the realm of reviewing. They are legitimately unreviewable. Most of them are. They're not really books. That's the thing that bothers me, is that they look like books. They look like these magical things that have transformed all our lives. This magic that we can carry around with us in our bag. They look the same way. They look just like books, but they're not really books. They're not. They're really implanted information nodes. And if they could be that, they would. And if their consumers could have them be that, they'd gladly have them be that way. And it bugs me because sometimes you will, like for instance, if you search on YouTube, if you just do a search for books, just type in books, I guarantee you that some of the things that will crop up first will be TED Talks by loathsome people who say, I read a book a day and you should too. And you think, oh, that's incredible, that's fantastic, yes, I've found a soulmate. And then you listen to the video and they're not talking about books at all. They're talking about life hacks. It feels like a perversion of a thing we all hold dear. But anyway, so that is it. Those are my bonus prompts, and that is the Bookish Boxes and Buzzwords tag for a bleak and barren Monday. So I'm hoping that tomorrow everything will just gear up and be back to normal. And today I'm just gonna have to spend it with my puppy. But anyway, I'll wrap this up for now. But I'll see you soon. Thank you, BookTube.